We're now looking at the west pediment of the Parthenon, and like with the east, it's all about Athene, and in fact this time it's her competition with Poseidon to be patron god of the city of Athens. So the idea was each god had to give the city a gift, and the very best gift would win the competition. Now Poseidon is meant to have put his trident into the ground and up has sprung water, but of course with him being god of the sea, that's salt water, and whilst he's essentially giving them sea power there, naval power, there's a limitation to the water in the sense that it's salt water as well, whereas Athene's gift is much more useful for sustaining life. She gives an olive tree, and of course olive trees can be used for many different things. There's not just the wood itself, there's the olives, there's also the fact that the oil can be used to be cooking, it can go into oil lamps for light. So this is why Athens is named Athens, after Athene. And this particular pediment faced Salamis, which is really interesting because that's the site of the famous sea battle in the Persian Wars that the Greeks won. And of course, they're therefore giving a bit of a nod to Poseidon in thanks for that help. So whilst there is that kind of competition element between Athene and Poseidon, it's not a conflict that can't be resolved, and they are honouring both gods really, ongoing from that point. Now, the top image, what you're looking at there is what you can see in the British Museum today. So just a reminder that like with the East Pediment, there's been a lot of damage to the figures, not just with the explosion that I mentioned before, but also the Venetians were taking some of the figures down off the pediment and the lifting gear broke and a number of statues kind of smashed to the ground. So whilst we might have had over 50 figures originally, we've only got a handful of them left. So we're going to talk predominantly about the ones that are surviving in fairly good condition, the two you can see in the middle, but I'm going to use a reconstruction of the apex from the Acropolis Museum just to talk about the main scene as well. So let's start there. The crossing diagonals between Athene and Poseidon are particularly good for showing conflict, the fact that they're kind of pulling away from one another. Notice the olive tree behind Athene there as well, and both gods are really recognisable from their attributes. And just a reminder of how we know what was at the apex if it's not there anymore. We've got those drawings from Jacques Carré, who was able to have seen it and sketched it before the damage took place. Now, the figures that we're looking at in the middle are on one side Iris, so the female messenger, Hermes' counterpart, and you can see from her beautiful flowing drapery and the motion lines that she's meant to be flying. And then on the right-hand side, we've got a river god, the river god Elisa, so he's named after a local river in Athens. And he's somebody that scholars talk about as particularly good in terms of representing a river because his drapery, according to Susan Woodford, laps behind like a current. But she also notes that, anatomically he's quite impressive too, because you can see the distinctions between the fat, the bone and the muscle in this particular sculpture. And something that I didn't mention with these pediment that I think is worth me commenting on now is that these pedimental sculptures are sculpted all the way round, which of course they don't need to be if they're strictly being placed in a pediment. I mean, who is going to see them from the back? But Athens had the money and the power to do so. And of course, when they were being lifted up to the Parthenon originally, people would have seen that. And it's that demonstration really from Athens of their wealth at that time. Now, in terms of what else is interesting in terms of the composition, so again, like with these pediment, all the figures are gods, so we've got an issue with proportions. We've also got flow of news decreasing towards the corners as well. But I think the major interest point with this pediment for me is just how strong geographically it is in terms of linking to Athens, the patron goddess of the city, the fact that this competition happened on the Acropolis, only yards away from the Parthenon. And also, like I mentioned before as well, the fact that it faces Salamis. So I just like how coherent and well thought out and planned the overall solution was.